The sky above the Meridian orbital ring did not just fall. It shattered. Cale Rourke looked up through the nanoglass visor of his helmet, watching a 10-mile section of the superstructure detach from its gravitational tethers. It descended through the upper atmosphere like the hammer of a vengeful god, glowing white-hot as friction ate away at its composite hull. The roar was not a sound, but a physical pressure, vibrating the marrow in his bones and rattling the teeth in his skull. "Move!" Cale shouted over the squad frequency. His voice was a gravel slide of exhaustion, stripped of fear by 2 decades of doing this exact thing in different hellholes across the sector. "We have 3 minutes before the shockwave hits the trench line. Get the civilians to the sub-level lift, now!" He stood his ground at the edge of a crumbling ferrocrete barrier, firing his pulse rifle in controlled bursts. The weapon bucked against his shoulder, spitting blue fire into the smoke. Ahead of him, the opposing insurrectionist forces were falling back, but their automated rearguard, a cluster of spider-walking siege drones, kept pressing forward, seemingly indifferent to the falling sky. Cale tossed the empty power cell from his rifle and reloaded. Behind him, the extraction unit was hauling a terrified group of colonists toward the heavy blast doors of the underground transit system. He counted them as they passed his peripheral vision. 12, 13, 14. A siege drone breached the smoke, its multi-jointed legs stabbing into the mud. It leveled a rotary cannon at the retreating civilians. Cale did not think. The rifle was too slow. He dropped it, his hand flashing to the magnetic sheath at his hip. In one fluid motion, he drew the blade. It was a weapon that belonged in a museum, not a battlefield. 30 inches of matte gray metal, forged from an alloy that felt warm to the touch even in the vacuum of space. It was a ceremonial relic he had pulled from the wreckage of a forgotten temple during his first tour, a talisman that had kept him alive when superior technology failed. He activated the kinetic exciters built into the hilt. The edge hummed, vibrating at a frequency that could separate molecular bonds. Cale sprinted, sliding under the drone's rotary fire. He came up inside its guard, swinging the blade in a savage upward arc aimed at the sensor cluster beneath the chassis. Metal met alien alloy. There was a sound like a cracking glacier. The drone collapsed, its central processor severed. But as Cale landed in the mud, the vibration in his hand felt wrong. The hum was gone. He looked down. A hairline fracture ran down the center of the blade, jagged and dark. It had not just dulled, it had died. Kyle stared at it, the chaos of the collapsing orbital ring fading into a dull background roar. For 20 years, he had told himself that skill and a little bit of ancient luck were enough to balance the scales against corporate greed and political incompetence. The broken metal in his hand said otherwise. It said that everything breaks eventually, even the things you think are immortal. "Sergeant," a voice crackled in his ear. "Civilians are clear, doors sealing in 10 seconds. Cale sheathed the dead weapon. He turned and ran, diving through the closing blast doors just as the orbital segment slammed into the surface 3 miles away. The earth heaved, and the world went dark. The debriefing room smelled of recycled air and stale coffee. It was a sterile white box located on the command cruiser orbiting safely above the devastation. Cale sat on a rigid polymer chair, still wearing his mud-streaked armor. Across the desk, Major Vane did not look up from his holographic display. The Major was a man whose uniform was too clean and whose eyes were too empty. "Report confirms the extraction was successful," Vane said, swiping away a casualty list with a casual flick of his finger. "Good work, Sergeant. However, telemetry indicates a structural failure in your primary melee asset." Kyle blinked, his eyes gritty with lack of sleep. "You mean my sword?" The Major looked up then. His gaze was sharp, predatory. The retrofitted ceremonial blade. Yes. Command requires you to submit the fragments for analysis immediately. Analysis, Kale repeated. It is a piece of metal. Major. It broke hitting a siege drone chassis. There is nothing to analyze. Vane leaned forward. The lights in the room seemed to dim. That is not a request, Sergeant Rourke. Intelligence suggests the alloy may have unstable properties when fractured. We cannot risk a radiological leak. You will deposit the weapon at the secure containment unit in Sector 7 before you stand down. Kale held the Major's gaze. A radiological leak was a lie. He knew the readings on that blade better than he knew his own blood pressure. It was inert. Understood, Kale said, standing up. He walked out of the office, his boots heavy on the deck plating. The order felt wrong. It felt urgent in a way that bureaucracy never was. They did not care about the civilians he had just saved. They cared about the garbage. He needed a second opinion. Sector 7 was the underbelly of the cruiser, a logistical nightmare of loading docks, fuel lines, and shadows where the cameras conveniently malfunctioned. Kale found Juno sitting on a crate of unauthorized medical supplies, eating a synthetic apple with a switchblade. Juno was a woman who wore her cynicism like a second skin. She had been an investigative journalist until she realized that the truth did not pay well, but smuggling rare liquor did. Her hair was a jagged cut of dyed violent violet, and her flight jacket was covered in patches from systems that no longer existed. You look like the back end of a thruster, Juno said, talking around a mouthful of apple. Rough day at the office. Kale tossed the sheathed blade onto the crate between them. The sound was dull, lifeless. Command wants it, Kale said. They said it might be radioactive. Juno raised an eyebrow. She wiped her hands on her pants and picked up the sheath. She drew the blade a few inches, revealing the jagged crack. She did not touch the metal. She pulled a small scanner from her pocket, a device that looked illegally modified, and ran it over the fracture. The scanner chirped a low, discordant note. Radioactive. My left eye, Juno muttered. She shoved the blade back into the sheath and looked at Kale, her expression suddenly stripped of humor. Kale, where did you say you found this thing? A ruin on the moon of Thetis. Kale said, 20 years ago. Juno tapped the scanner against her chin. Thetis was a colony world, but before that, it was a pilgrimage site. This alloy is not just hardened steel. It is psych-reactive. It is Varen blood tech. Kale frowned. Varen, the fox kind. The same, Juno said. Their royalty uses this stuff to interface with their ships, their archives, even their security grids. It bonds to the user. If this thing broke, it is not just a broken sword, it is a severed connection. If Command wants it, they do not want to study it. They want to trace it. Trace it to what? To whatever source code is embedded in the molecular lattice, Juno said. Or to whoever it was forged for. If I were you, I would not hand this over. I would lose it in a poker game, or accidentally drop it out an airlock. I was ordered to take it to containment, Kale said. Juno took another bite of her apple. And I was ordered to pay taxes on this crate of antibiotics. We all have disappointments. Before Kale could respond, the proximity alarm on his wrist gauntlet beeped. It was not a command frequency, it was a distress signal. He looked at the readout. It was a wide-band emergency broadcast, weak and garbled, bouncing off the atmospheric disturbance below. Most signals were encrypted military traffic. This was open, desperate. Source is the Tokugawa Garden Station, Kale said, reading the data. That place is quarantined. Juno leaned over to look. The biohazard event from 6 months ago. The official story is that a fungal spore wiped out the hydroponics. Nobody goes there. The signal is repeating, Kale said. It is not an automated loop. Someone is manually keying the transmitter. Juno looked at him, then at the sword, then back at him. Kale, you are off the clock. You have a direct order to turn in that weapon. If you go chasing ghosts in a quarantine zone, you are going AWOL. Kale picked up the sword. He felt the weight of it, the uselessness of the broken metal. But Juno's words about Veyron blood tech rattled in his head. Command lying about the radiation, the sudden urgency. If someone is alive down there, Kale said, nobody else is coming for them. Juno sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation. You have a hero complex. It is terminal. I will keep the hangar bay override active for 60 minutes. If you are not back, I am selling your bunk. The Tokugawa Garden Station was a spinning cylinder of glass and steel floating in the debris field of the shattered ring. Kyle approached in a stolen maintenance shuttle, navigating through clouds of frozen atmosphere and twisted metal. He docked manually, forcing the clamps to engage with a rusted airlock. The station was silent. When he cycled the inner door, the air that hit him was not stale. It smelled of rain and ozone. He moved through the corridors, his pulse rifle raised. The station was an artificial paradise. Holographic skies projected a perpetual twilight. Bioluminescent trees twisted upward, their roots cracking the floor tiles. But the beauty was wrong. The lights flickered with a rhythmic, sickly pulse. Shadows seemed to stretch and detach themselves from the walls. The distress signal led him to the central arboretum, a massive dome filled with dense purple foliage. The silence here was heavy, oppressive. It felt like walking into a room where an argument had just ended. Kale scanned the perimeter. Movement, near the central fountain, where the water had turned stagnant and black. A figure lay crumpled against the stone rim. Kale advanced slowly. "Identify yourself," he barked. The figure moved. It was not human. She was slight, wearing tattered ceremonial robes that had once been white silk, now stained with mud and something darker. As she turned her head, Kale saw the features that marked her as Veyron. High, angular cheekbones, large, sensitive ears that twitched toward the sound of his voice. And behind her, curled tight against her body in pain, were tails. Not one or two, but 9 of them, their fur matted and dull. She was Veyron royalty. The number of tails dictated status, and 9 was a myth he had only heard in bar stories. She tried to stand, but her legs gave way. She was flickering. That was the only word for it. Her body seemed to drift in and out of focus, becoming translucent, then solid, then translucent again. It was as if she was vibrating between 2 different realities. "Stay back," she whispered. Her voice was like wind chimes in a storm. "The mirror layer, it is unstable." Kale lowered his rifle slightly. "You sent the signal. You are hurt." She looked at him, her eyes a startling luminous gold. "I am being hunted," as if on cue. The glass ceiling of the arboretum shattered. 3 security drones dropped from the upper gantry. They were not the bulky siege models from the surface. These were sleek, silent assassin units, shaped like metallic wasps with monofilament wings. Their sensors swept the room in red grids. "Target acquired." A synthesized voice announced, "Veyron designation Lysara. Priority red. Execute." Kale brought his rifle up, but the leading drone moved with impossible speed. It slapped the weapon from his hands with a wingtip, the force of the blow sending the rifle spinning into the dark water of the fountain. The drone lunged for the girl. Kale tackled it. It was a stupid move. The drone was solid alloy and hydraulics. He was flesh and bone, but the impact knocked it off course. Kale rolled, his armor scraping against the stone. The second drone dove at him, its stinger tail charged with plasma. Kyle scrambled back, his hand finding the hilt of the broken blade. He drew it. It was not a sword anymore. It was a jagged crowbar, but it was all he had. The drone struck. Kyle caught the stinger on the flat of the broken blade. Sparks showered his face. He roared, driving his knee into the drone's optic sensor, shattering the glass. He leveraged the broken blade into the drone's neck joint and twisted. Metal shrieked, and the head snapped off. The third drone hovered, calculating. It primed a wide-area concussive blast. Kale scrambled toward the girl. Lysara. He grabbed her, pulling her behind the heavy stone of the fountain just as the blast hit. The shockwave threw them against the back wall. Kale's ears rang. He looked down at Lysara. She was seizing. The phasing effect was going wild. Her hand gripped his arm, and suddenly the world tilted. It was not a physical sensation. It was a psychic collision. Kale gasped as a flood of alien sensation poured into his nervous system. He felt the cold of deep space. He felt a sorrow so profound it felt like drowning. He felt the sharp, terrifying betrayal of a knife in the back, wielded by a familiar hand. And she felt him. He saw his own memories flash in his mind's eye, but viewed from the outside. The exhaustion, the trench, the blade breaking, the overwhelming desire to just stop fighting and sleep for 100 years. Lysara's eyes snapped open, locking onto his. The gold irises swirled. "You are." "So tired," she whispered. Her voice echoed inside his skull, bypassing his ears entirely. The connection stabilized. The phasing around her body slowed. She was drawing on his nervous system to ground herself, using his sheer, stubborn endurance as an anchor. The surviving drone rounded the fountain. Lysara did not let go of his arm. She squeezed, and Kale felt a surge of adrenaline that was not his own. It was a primal, terrified defiance. The drone fired a suppression dart. Kale deflected it with the broken blade, moving faster than he should have been able to. The empathic link was sharpening his reflexes, or maybe she was pushing him. He lunged, slamming the jagged tip of the blade through the drone's central chassis. It sparked and died, crashing to the floor. Silence returned to the Arboretum, broken only by their ragged breathing. Kale slumped against the fountain, his chest heaving. He looked at Lysara. She was solid now, the phasing gone, but she was bleeding from a wound in her side. Her blood was not red. It was a shimmering, iridescent violet. She looked at the blade in his hand. It was trembling, not because he was afraid, but because his muscles were failing. She reached out, her fingers hovering over the fractured metal. She looked up at his face, and he saw a depth of intelligence and pain that terrified him more than the drones. "End me. Or help me," the alien fox princess whispered as the veteran's broken blade trembled. The request hung in the air. Kale knew the protocol. An unidentified alien combatant in a quarantine zone. The smart play was to walk away. The merciful play, given her wounds, might have been to grant her first request. But Kale Rourke was not smart, and he was done with killing. He sheathed the blade. "I am not an executioner," Kale said, his voice rough, "and I am not leaving you here." He reached into his utility belt and pulled out a field trauma kit. He ripped open a biofoam canister. "This is going to sting." He pressed the foam to her side. Lysara hissed, her tails lashing out in a reflex of pain, but she did not pull away. As the foam set, sealing the wound, a strange hum filled the air. Kale looked down. The broken blade, still in its sheath at his hip, was glowing. A soft, rhythmic pulse of blue light leaked from the scabbard, matching the beat of Lysara's heart. "The alloy," she murmured, her eyes widening. "It sings to the blood." "We can figure out the acoustics later," Kale said, pulling her to her feet. He wrapped her arm over his shoulder. "Right now, we need to move." Getting back to the shuttle was a blur of corridors and flickering lights. Lysara was light, her bones seemingly hollow like a bird's, but her presence in his mind was heavy. He could feel her pain as a dull ache in his own side, and her fear as a cold knot in his stomach. They reached the airlock. Kyle cycled the hatch, dragging her into the pilot's seat of the maintenance shuttle. "Strap in," he ordered. He jumped into the cockpit, firing the thrusters. The shuttle shuddered and detached from the station. Incoming transmission. The console beeped. A holographic window popped up. It was Juno. Her face was pale. "Kale, get out of there!" she yelled. "I have 3 interceptors on my scope. They are not military. They are private contractors. Black Ops signatures. I see them," Kyle said, punching the throttle. The G-force slammed him back into the seat. He saw 3 sleek black vessels tearing through the debris field, closing fast. "I am bringing the skimmer around for a hot pickup," Juno shouted. "Ditch that shuttle. It is too slow." Kale looked at the navigation map. Juno was right. The maintenance tub couldn't outrun military-grade pursuit. He looked at Lysara. "Can you jump?" She looked at him, her golden eyes fierce. "I can fly if I have to." "We are going to do a mid-space transfer," Kale said into the comms. "Juno, match my velocity. I am blowing the canopy." "You are insane!" Juno screamed, but he saw her ship, a battered but heavily modified freighter, screaming toward them. Kale unbuckled. He grabbed Lysara, wrapping one arm tight around her waist. He reached for the emergency ejection lever. "Hold your breath," he said. He pulled the lever. Explosive bolts shattered the canopy. The vacuum of space sucked the air from his lungs. Silence descended instantly. They were floating in the void. Below them, the shattered ring burned. Ahead, the black shape of Juno's ship loomed, its cargo bay doors yawning open. Kyle kicked off the hull of the dying shuttle, pushing them toward the open bay. He felt Lysara cling to him, her tails wrapping around his legs like anchors. For a second, they drifted, suspended between the stars and the ruin. Then the artificial gravity of Juno's ship grabbed them. They slammed onto the deck of the cargo bay, sliding across the metal. The bay doors hissed shut. Atmosphere flooded back in with a roar. Kyle gasped, sucking in lungfuls of air. He rolled over, checking Lysara. She was shivering, but alive. Juno's voice came over the ship's intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the sarcastic starfish. Please keep your hands and feet inside the vehicle while we run for our lives." The ship lurched as the jump drives engaged. The stars outside stretched into lines of light, and then they were gone, slipping into the gray tunnel of hyperspace. An hour later, they were huddled in the small galley of Juno's ship. Lysara was wrapped in a thermal blanket, sipping a cup of nutrient tea. Her ears were flattened against her skull. Juno stood by the holoprojector, her face grim. She tapped a key. "Look at this," she said. A newsfeed hovered in the air. It showed a grainy image of Kale's face, taken from his service file. Next to it was a distorted image of Lysara from the Garden Station security cameras. Breaking news. The anchor announced, "Sergeant Kale Rourke, highly decorated veteran, has been declared a traitor to the coalition. Evidence suggests he has defected to a radical terrorist cell responsible for the biological attack on the Tokugawa station. He is accompanied by an unidentified alien combatant." The image shifted. It showed a group of severe-looking men and women sitting at a high table. In response to this unparalleled security threat, the High Council has invoked emergency powers. Martial law is now in effect across all Outer Rim territories. All citizens are ordered to report any sightings of the fugitives immediately. Kyle watched the screen. They had moved fast, too fast. The narrative was already written. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a monster. He looked at the broken blade sitting on the table. It was dark now. The blue glow faded. You picked a hell of a time to grow a conscience. Kale, Juno said softly. Kale looked at Lysara. She was watching him, her expression unreadable. But he could feel a flicker of emotion from her, not fear, and not pain. It was gratitude. He picked up the broken blade and strapped it back onto his hip. Turn off the news. Juno, Kyle said, we have work to do. The megacity of Aurum 5 did not sit on the surface of a planet. It hung suspended in the crushing gravity well of a gas giant named the Behemoth. A swirling marble of violent orange and bruised purple storms that filled half the sky. The city was a tiered monstrosity of plasteel and neon, a parasite clinging to the edge of the atmosphere, sucking volatile gases from the clouds below to power the millions of lights that never turned off. Down in the lower decks, known locally as the sump, day and night were theoretical concepts. Here, time was measured in the rhythmic thrum of the massive atmospheric recyclers and the flickering of holographic advertisements selling synthetic bliss and noodle bowls. Cale Rourke leaned against a graffiti-stained wall, his arms crossed over his chest. He wore a heavy civilian coat over his armor, the collar turned up to hide his face. The air smelled of ozone, frying grease, and the metallic tang of recycled water. Keep your head down, Kyle muttered into his comm's earbead. And for the love of sanity, try not to look like royalty. 3 meters ahead of him, Lysara of Vera was attempting to look like a common dock worker. It was not going well. She moved with a liquid grace that suggested palace floors, not grime-slicked gratings. She wore a bulky mechanic's jumpsuit that Juno had stolen from a laundry depot. But the real problem was the glitching technology clipped to her belt. Juno had called it a Hologlamour Unit Mark IV. Cale called it a liability. The device was supposed to project a visual field around Lysara, masking her 9 foxtails and the tall, tufted ears that marked her species. When it worked, she looked like a human woman with slightly exotic features. When it did not work, she looked like a strobe light having a seizure. Lysara paused at a street vendor selling charred lizard skewers. She leaned in to inspect the wares, and the emitter on her belt gave a high-pitched whine. For a split second, the human disguise vanished. 9 shimmering spectral tails fanned out behind her like a peacock's display, knocking a stack of tin plates off the counter with a clatter. The vendor, a grizzled cyborg with 1 red ocular implant, blinked. Did you just sparkle? The vendor asked, staring at the empty air where the tails had been a second ago. Lysara froze. The emitter buzzed again, and her left ear popped into existence, twitching nervously, before vanishing back into the hologram. It is a new fashion trend, Lysara said, her voice pitched high and tight. Very popular in the upper spires. It is called flash modding. The vendor squinted. It looks like faulty wiring. It is avant-garde, Lysara insisted. She grabbed a skewer, slapped a credit chip on the counter, and walked away stiffly, her invisible tails clearly tucked tight against her legs. Cale pushed off the wall and followed, shaking his head. Juno's voice crackled in his ear. I saw that. She is terrible at lying. It is almost cute. She is going to get us killed. Juno, Cale whispered, we need to get off the street. I am securing the safe house, Juno replied. Turn left at the next intersection. Look for a sign that says the Happy Piston. Try not to get mugged. The safe house was a single room above a repair shop that shook every time a heavy transport ship docked nearby. It was cluttered with spare droid parts and smelled of hydraulic fluid. But it had a locking door and a window that looked out over the endless drop into the gas giant's clouds. Lysara sat on a crate, unclipping the glamour unit with a sigh of relief. The hologram dissolved, and her true form appeared. Her ears perked up, swiveling to catch the hum of the city, and her tails uncurled, filling the cramped space with russet and gold fur. She looked exhausted. The transition from the garden station to this industrial nightmare had drained her. Kale checked the perimeter sensors he had glued to the doorframe. Clear. He turned to face her. The incident at the market was close. Too close. We cannot stay here long. Lysara picked at the nutrient bar Juno had thrown at her. I am trying, Kyle, but hiding who I am is physically painful. My biology reacts to suppression. You are going to have to get used to the pain, Kale said, his voice harder than he intended. Half the sector is looking for us. The other half just wants the bounty. Juno, who was soldering a connection on her datapad in the corner, looked up. Speaking of bounties, the price on your head just went up. Kale, you are now worth 50,000 credits. Lysara is worth 100,000. I am feeling a little insulted that I am only worth 5. Why are they hunting us this hard? Lysara asked quietly. It is not just the assassination. Regimes change. Rulers die. This feels desperate. Kale sat down opposite her, the broken blade on his hip clinking against the chair. Tell us what happened. The truth, not the press release. Lysara looked out the window at the swirling storms. Her face, usually so composed, looked young and fractured. My mother, the Empress, was not just a ruler. She began. She was the anchor of the Veyron psychoactive network. Our people, we do not just govern with laws. We govern with feeling. The Empress acts as a filter for the collective emotional state of the populace. Juno stopped soldering. That sounds exhausting. It is, Lysara said, but it keeps the peace. Last week, she was meeting with the Meridian Accord. They wanted to renegotiate the mining rights for the psionic crystals in our crust. They wanted to strip mine the sacred valleys. My mother refused. She said it would kill the planet's biosphere. And then she died, Kale said. Lysara nodded. Poison. A toxin that targets the empathic centers of the brain. It causes a feedback loop of pure terror. She died screaming. I was the only one in the room because I was trying to help her manage the pain. When the guards burst in, I was holding the cup. Classic frame, Juno muttered. It was Prince Soren, Lysara said, her voice trembling with a mix of rage and grief. My cousin. He has been lobbying for the mining deal for years. He claims it will bring prosperity. But when I fled, the Meridian Accord fleet was already moving into orbit. They did not just want the mines. They wanted the exile of the heir so they could invalidate the protection treaties. Kale stared at her. He saw the tremor in her hands. He realized suddenly that she was not just a fugitive royal. She was a grieving daughter who had been forced to run before she could even bury her mother. A resource seizure, Kale said, his mind working through the tactical implications. They incite a civil war, blame it on a rogue princess, and then the coalition peacekeepers move in to secure the assets, and the Meridian Accord gets the contracts. Juno finished. It is a corporate takeover dressed up as a political crisis. Kale stood up. He walked to the window. The neon lights of the city reflected in his eyes. We need to move, Kale said. If they are tracking the blade, they know we are in this system. As if on cue, a heavy knock pounded on the door. Kale's hand was on the hilt of his broken blade instantly. Juno grabbed her pistol. Lysara pulled her legs up, her tails wrapping around her like a shield. A voice came through the door, muffled. calm. "Sergeant Rourke, we do not want to fight. We want to talk." Cale motioned for Juno to flank the door. He stepped to the side of the frame. "Talk fast," Cale said. The lock clicked. The door slid open. A man stood in the hallway. He wore a gray suit that cost more than the entire building. He was unarmed, his hands raised in a gesture of peace that looked rehearsed. "My name is Agent Silas," the man said. "I represent a faction within naval intelligence that is skeptical of the current narrative." Kyle did not relax. "Step inside. Keep your hands where I can see them." Silas stepped in, his eyes darting to Lysara and then to the blade on Cale's hip. He smiled, a tight, thin expression. "You are a difficult man to find, Sergeant, but that weapon of yours leaves a unique footprint in the energy grid." "What do you want?" Cale asked. "We want the girl," Silas said, pointing a manicured finger at Lysara. "And we want the blade. In exchange, we offer you a full pardon, reinstatement of rank, back pay, and a quiet retirement on a colony world of your choice." Cale laughed. It was a dry, humorless bark. "You think I believe that?" "I think you are a pragmatist," Silas said. "You are one man with a broken sword and a smuggler friend. You are up against the Meridian Accord and the High Council. You cannot win. Give us the asset. We will ensure she is treated humanely." Lysara watched Cale. She did not speak. She did not beg. She just watched him with those wide, golden eyes. Cale looked at Silas. He looked at the clean suit, the arrogant tilt of the head. He thought about the trench. He thought about the civilians he had saved while officers like Silas watched from orbit. "I am not a pragmatist," Cale said softly. "I am a soldier, and soldiers do not trade lives for pensions." Silas's smile vanished. "That is a disappointing answer." "Get out," Cale said, "before I throw you out the window." Silas straightened his jacket. "You have made a mistake. Sergeant, the next knock on this door will not be polite." He turned and walked away. Kyle slammed the door and locked it. "We are leaving," Kyle said. "Now." They did not make it far. The plan was to move through the subterranean maintenance tunnels to reach the spaceport, bypassing the main thoroughfares. But as they navigated the dripping, steam-filled corridors of the city's underbelly, the tension in the group was palpable. Lysara was lagging behind. The emotional strain of the encounter with Silas was weighing on her. Cale slowed down, falling back to walk beside her. "You okay?" he asked. Lysara looked up at him. "You could have taken the deal." "I do not take deals from suits," Cale said. "It is more than that," Lysara said. She stopped walking. The tunnel was dark, lit only by the distant glow of bioluminescent fungi growing on the wet walls. She reached out, her hand hovering near his chest. The empathic link between them flared. Cale felt it immediately. It was not an invasion. It was a resonance. He felt her gratitude, warm and golden, washing over his own jagged defenses. But he also felt her curiosity. She was seeing him. Not the soldier, not the veteran, but the man beneath the armor. She stepped closer. Her eyes were searching his face. "I feel it," she whispered. "Feel what?" Cale asked, his voice rough. "Your instinct," she said. "It is not duty. It is not just orders. It is like a flame. You protect people because you are terrified of losing anyone else. It burns you. Cale, this need to be a shield." Cale took a step back. The intimacy of it, the sensation of her mind brushing against his rawest nerves, was more terrifying than a plasma bolt. "Don't do that," he said. "Stay out of my head." "I cannot help it," Lysara said, a faint smile touching her lips. You are very loud for a quiet man. Your emotions are intoxicating, like standing near a blast furnace in winter. She took a step forward, closing the gap he had created. Her tails twitched with a playful energy that cut through the gloom. Are you afraid of me, Sergeant? She teased. You killed a siege drone with a broken knife, but a little empathy makes you flinch. I am not flinching, Kale lied. I am maintaining tactical awareness. She laughed, a soft musical sound that seemed to push back the dark. Her hand touched his chest, right over his heart. The warmth intensified. Kale felt his pulse spike. He looked down at her lips, then up to her eyes. The air between them charged with a static that had nothing to do with the city's power grid. Tactical awareness, she repeated, leaning in. Is that what we are calling it? Kale found himself leaning in too. The exhaustion, the danger, the dirt. It all faded. There was just the scent of her, like rain on dry earth, and the golden light of her eyes. Boom. The wall of the tunnel to their left exploded inward. Kale tackled Lysara, shielding her body with his own as debris showered them. Juno, who had been scouting ahead, came running back, her pistol drawn. Incoming, Juno screamed. It is the circus! Through the hole in the wall, 3 figures emerged from the smoke, silhouetted by the neon lights of the street beyond. They were dressed in motley armor, painted in garish colors of mismatched brights, pinks, greens, and yellows. They wore masks that were frozen in exaggerated, grotesque expressions of joy. The laughing apostles. Juno groaned. I hate these guys, the leader. A massive brute wearing a helmet with a painted grin that stretched from ear to ear, stepped over the rubble. He leveled a heavy cannon at them. I told you they were in the sewers, the brute roared. His voice was amplified and distorted. I win the betting pool. The second figure, a wiry sniper perched on a pipe, cackled. You blew up a load-bearing wall. Giggles. You are going to bring the ceiling down on us. Details. Details. Giggles yelled. He fired. Kale rolled, dragging Lysara behind a concrete pillar. The cannon shot vaporized the spot where they had been standing. Return fire, Kale shouted. Juno popped up and fired 3 shots. The third figure, a dual-wielding skirmisher in a jester's cap, deflected the bolts with energy shields built into his gauntlets. Ooh, she shoots back, the skirmisher squealed. I like her. Can we keep her? Giggles? Kill the guy. Bag the fox. Keep the smuggler for parts, Giggles commanded, advancing with thudding footsteps. Kale drew the broken blade. It was useless as a sword against heavy armor, but it was still a bar of indestructible alloy. Lysara, stay down, Kale ordered. He broke cover, sprinting toward Giggles. The brute laughed and swung the cannon like a club. Kale slid on the wet floor, passing between the brute's legs. He slashed at the hydraulic lines on the back of the knee joint. The blade bit deep. Hydraulic fluid sprayed out. Giggles roared and stumbled, his leg locking up. You little rat! Giggles screamed, spinning around. The sniper on the pipe took aim at Kale. Lysara, seeing the danger, threw out a hand. A pulse of psychic force, unfocused and raw, erupted from her. It slammed into the sniper, knocking him off his perch. He fell into the sewage water with a splash. Nice shot. Princess, Juno yelled, providing covering fire. Kyle scrambled up a pile of debris. We need a way out. Juno pointed to a rusted grate in the floor of the tunnel. Down! It is the only way. They gathered at the grate. Kyle kicked it. It was rusted shut. Giggles was recovering, limping toward them, his cannon charging up with a high-pitched whine. The jester was dancing closer, blades extending from his wrist guards. Allow me, Kale said. He jammed the broken blade into the grate's hinge. He pulled, his muscles strained. the tendons in his neck standing out. The hinge snapped. Kale ripped the grate free. Go! Lysara jumped first, vanishing into the darkness below. Juno followed. Kale looked back at the apostles. Giggles fired. The shot went wide, blasting the ceiling. Next time, bring a smaller gun, Kale shouted and dropped into the hole. They fell for what felt like 10 seconds, sliding down a steep, slick chute. They landed in a heap on a floor of smooth, cool stone. Kyle groaned and sat up, everyone in one piece. I think I sat on my tail, Lysara whimpered. Juno stood up and ignited a flare. The red light hissed, illuminating the space around them. They were not in a sewer anymore. The chamber was vast, a cathedral of silent darkness. The walls were not made of the city's plasteel, but of ancient, hand-carved obsidian. Massive pillars rose up into the gloom, covered in intricate, glowing moss. Where are we? Kale whispered. Juno swept the flare around. This is deep, sub-foundation level. This stuff predates the colony, predates the coalition. Lysara stood up, her eyes wide. She walked toward the wall. This is Veyron, she said breathlessly. She traced her fingers over a mural carved into the stone. It depicted a star chart, but the stars were connected by lines of silver inlay. In the center of the mural was a figure, a woman with 9 tails, standing back to back with a warrior holding a long, straight sword. Kale stepped closer. The figure of the warrior, it looked familiar, not the face, but the stance. The way he held the weapon, the blade-bonded guardian. Lysara translated the glyphs, and the Fox Queen. It is the legend of the first treaty. As she spoke, the broken blade on Kale's hip began to hum. It was a deep, resonant sound, like a cello string bowed slowly. Kale drew the weapon. It was glowing again, the blue light pulsing in time with the moss on the walls. Lysara reached out and touched the blade. The reaction was instant. A beam of hard light shot from the fractured tip of the sword, striking the mural. The silver lines on the wall flared with brilliance. The star chart shifted, rotating until it highlighted a single small moon in a distant sector. The archive moon of Ethelgard, Lysara whispered. The Forbidden Library. Juno looked at the map. That sector is a dead zone. Navigation hazards, gravity wells. Nobody goes there. That is why it is safe, Lysara said. The archives contain the original unedited history of the Veyron people, including the succession laws and including the truth about the resource treaties. If we can get there, Kale said, realizing the implication, we can prove you are the rightful heir. We can prove the Meridian Accord is lying, but it is a suicide run. Juno pointed out, we have a broken ship, no credits, and a bounty on our heads. Kale looked at the mural. He looked at the warrior who stood back to back with the queen. He felt a strange sense of vertigo, as if history was repeating itself in a rhyme he hadn't learned yet. He looked at Lysara. She was looking at him, waiting. I am just a grunt, Kale said quietly, the vulnerability slipping through his voice for the first time. I know how to hold a line. I know how to break things. I do not know how to fix a planet. Lysara, I do not know how to be. This, whatever this is. He gestured between them. Lysara stepped closer. The light from the map illuminated her face. I was raised to be a symbol, she said. I was taught to use my smile as a negotiation tactic and my empathy as a lie detector. I weaponize charm. Kale. It is what I do. But with you. She reached out and took his hand, his calloused, scarred fingers against her pale skin. With you, I do not want to be a tactic. I want to be real. I want to survive this, but not just for the throne. For us. Kale looked at her hand. He tightened his grip. Real, he repeated. I can do real. Juno cleared her throat loudly. She was holding up her data pad, the camera lens glowing red. I got that on tape, she said. The lighting is excellent. You are recording this, Kale asked, exasperated. For the exposé, Juno grinned. When we take down the Meridian Accord, the public is going to need a human interest angle. The soldier and the princess. It sells itself. Plus, if we die, at least I leave behind a killer documentary. Kale sheathed the glowing blade. The map on the wall faded, but the coordinates were burned into his memory. We are going to Ethelgard, Kale said. Juno holstered her flare. How do we get out of here? Lysara pointed to a drafty tunnel on the far side of the shrine. The air flows that way. It likely leads to the ventilation shafts of the spaceport. Then let's move, Kale said, before the clowns wake up and find a ladder. They moved toward the tunnel, leaving the ancient shrine behind in the darkness. But the silence had changed. It was no longer the silence of a tomb. It was the silence of a beginning. As they walked, Lysara brushed against Kale's arm. He didn't pull away. He adjusted his stride to match hers, a silent guardian stepping into the light. Destination, Ethelgard. Status, fugitive. Probability of survival, low. Kale smiled in the dark. It was the best odds he had had in years. The approach to the moon of Ethelgard was not a flight through space, but a navigation through a graveyard of physics. The sensors on the sarcastic starfish screamed warnings that made no mathematical sense. Gravity wells spiked and vanished like phantom heartbeats. The moon itself did not look like rock. It looked like a gray, furrowed lung floating in the void, its surface shifting and rippling as if it were breathing. Juno wrestled with the flight yoke, her boots braced against the console. I am telling you, the geometry down there is wrong, Juno shouted over the groan of the hull. The landing sensors say the ground is 3,000 feet away, but the visual feeds say we are about to scrape paint. Trust the visuals, Kyle said, strapped into the co-pilot seat. He gripped the arms of the chair, his knuckles white. This is a Varen archive. It is built on psionic architecture. It reacts to intent, not just radar. Lysara sat in the jump seat behind them. Her eyes were closed, her face pale. She was murmuring in a language Kale did not recognize, her hands clutching the safety harness. We are intruders, Lysara whispered. The moon knows we are here. It is trying to decide if we are pilgrims or parasites. Tell it we are tourists, Juno yelled. We have excellent reviews. The ship shuddered violently as it punched through the atmospheric membrane. The gray clouds parted, revealing a landscape that defied logic. Giant spires of obsidian twisted into the sky like frozen smoke. Bridges made of light connected floating plateaus. The ground was not dirt, but a tessellation of hexagonal stones that moved, rising and falling in a slow, rhythmic wave. There, Lysara said, pointing to a massive circular depression in the center of a stone forest. The eye of memory. Land there. Juno flared the thrusters. The ship slammed down, the landing struts groaning in protest. The engines whined down and silence rushed in, a heavy, waiting silence. Kale unbuckled. He checked his pulse rifle, then the broken blade at his hip. The blade was humming again, a low, demanding vibration that rattled his teeth. Stay sharp, Kale said. If this place is active, the automated defenses might be too. They lowered the ramp. The air outside was thin and cold, smelling of old paper and ozone. As Kale stepped onto the moving hexagonal stones, he felt a strange sensation of weightlessness, as if the moon's gravity was merely a suggestion. The entrance to the archive was a colossal archway carved into the base of the central spire. There were no doors, only a shimmering veil of mist. Lysara stepped forward. The mist swirled, reacting to her presence. It turned a soft, welcoming gold. "It recognizes the blood," she said quietly, "but it will test the spirit." She walked through. Kale and Juno followed. The interior was a labyrinth of living stone. Corridors shifted and reconfigured themselves as they walked. If Kale looked left, he saw a hallway stretching for miles. If he blinked and looked again, it was a dead end. The walls were lined with alcoves containing crystals that pulsed with light. These were the memory echoes. "Do not touch anything," Lysara warned. "These crystals contain the sensory history of the Veyran Empire. If you touch one without shielding, you could live 1,000 lifetimes in a second. It would liquefy your brain." Juno pulled her hand back from a particularly shiny crystal. "Noted. Brain liquefaction is bad for my complexion." They reached a central rotunda. The floor was a mirror-smooth surface of black glass. Above them, the ceiling was a holographic projection of the galaxy as it had looked 10,000 years ago. Sudden, violent vertigo hit Kale. He dropped to one knee, clutching his head. "Kale," Lysara cried out, reaching for him. But as she moved, the room shifted. The black glass floor dissolved into mist. The rotunda vanished. They were separated. Lysara was no longer on the moon. She was back in the Sun Palace on Vera. The air was warm and smelled of jasmine and burning wax. She was standing in her mother's private solar. The Empress sat on her divan, looking out at the gardens. She looked tired. Her tails were wrapped around her, dull and listless. "Mother," Lysara whispered. It was a memory. The last day. The Empress turned. Her eyes were kind but filled with a sorrow Lysara had not understood at the time. "Lisa," the Empress said. Her voice was real. The sound of it broke Lysara's heart all over again. "You must leave the capital. The negotiations with the Meridian Accord, they are not going well." "I am staying," the memory Lysara said. "I will not leave you to face Prince Soren alone." Lysara watched the scene play out, helpless to change it. She saw herself pour the tea. She saw her mother take the cup. But this time, the archive showed her more. It showed her the shadows. In the corner of the room, distorted by a cloaking field, stood two figures. One was Prince Soren, his face twisted in a sneer of anticipation. The other was a human male, dressed in the corporate gray of a high-level executive. Lysara watched as the human executive tapped a device on his wrist. A microscopic drone, no larger than a dust mote, detached from the ceiling and landed in the teacup just before Lysara poured the water. It was not the tea leaves. It was an insertion. The Empress drank. She gasped, dropping the cup. The china shattered. Lysara screamed, rushing to her mother. But the memory Lysara did not see the two figures in the corner. The real Lysara did. She saw Prince Soren nod to the human. She saw the human smile, a cold, calculated expression of a business deal closed. "It is done," the human said. "The asset is neutralized. The seizure clause is active." "Mother!" Lysara screamed, falling to her knees in the illusion. The Empress looked at her, not the memory daughter, but the real Lysara watching from the future. "Run, little fox," the Empress whispered. "Become the storm." The vision shattered. Kale was standing in mud, freezing, knee-deep mud mixed with oil and blood. He was back on Ridge 9. The sky was a bruised purple. The rain was falling in sheets. This was the mission that had earned him his second commendation. The mission where he had held the line against a separatist battalion to allow a civilian transport to escape. Or so he had thought. "Keep firing!" Kale roared, his pulse rifle overheating in his hands. He saw the faces of his squad: Miller, Jackson, Vain. They were all screaming, pinned down by heavy artillery. "We have to buy them time," Cale yelled. The archive shifted the perspective. Suddenly, Cale was not in his own body. He was drifting above the battlefield, looking down with the cold detachment of a satellite. He saw his squad holding the ridge. He saw the separatist forces converging on them. And then he saw the civilian transport. It was empty. There were no refugees. The transport was flying on autopilot. It was a decoy. Cale's stomach churned. He looked to the east, 5 miles away. While the separatists were focused on Cale's squad, a black unmarked dropship descended on the real objective. A small mining settlement built on a deposit of rare isotopes. He watched, horrified, as soldiers in corporate armor, Meridian Accord armor, poured out of the dropship. They didn't evacuate the civilians. They deployed gas canisters. The villagers fell where they stood. The soldiers moved in, securing the mine, stepping over the bodies of children to plant their flags. Cale watched his friends die on the ridge. Miller took a plasma bolt to the chest. Jackson was vaporized by a mortar. They died thinking they were saving lives. They were just noise. They were a distraction to cover up a massacre. Cale roared, a sound of pure animalistic rage. He swung his fist at the vision, but his hand passed through the smoke. "You used us," he screamed at the empty sky. "You killed them for rock." The vision dissolved into static. Cale hit the black glass floor of the rotunda hard. He was gasping for air, his hands trembling. Tears streamed down his face, hot and angry. Lysara was kneeling a few feet away, her body shaking. Juno was standing over them, looking pale. Juno stammered, "I saw a ledger, a financial report. They listed the bribes. They listed the assassination costs. It was just a spreadsheet." Kyle stood up. His movements were stiff, mechanical. The rage inside him had crystallized into something colder, harder. "The Meridian Accord," Cale said. His voice was a grind of tectonic plates. "It is not just a trade alliance. It is a slaughterhouse." Lysara looked up. Her eyes were burning with a terrifying intensity. "They killed my mother to break the Varen will," she said. "And they killed my squad to steal a mine." Cale said, "They are playing both sides. They create the war. They sell the weapons. And then they steal the resources while everyone is busy dying." Juno tapped her datapad. Her hands were shaking, but she was smiling a vicious, shark-like smile. "I got it," she said. The archive automatically uploaded the source data to my pad. I have the receipts. Kyle, I have the comms logs between Prince Soren and the Meridian CEO. I have the footage of the gas attack. This is not just a scandal. This is an execution warrant for the entire board of directors. "We have the evidence," Lysara said. "Now we just need to survive long enough to use it." As if the universe was listening. The rotunda shook. A hole was blasted through the far wall. Dust and debris filled the air. 3 figures stepped through the breach. They were clad in sleek, matte black armor that absorbed the light. Their faces were hidden behind featureless sensory domes. "Meridian Elimination Team," the lead figure announced. Their voice was synthesized, flat, target confirmation. Cale drew the broken blade. It flared with blue light, sensing the threat. "Run!" Cale shouted. The team opened fire. Silent, high-velocity kinetic rounds chipped the obsidian pillars. They scrambled into the shifting corridors. The archive, sensing the violence, began to react. Gravity twisted. The floor became the wall. The ceiling became a steep slope. "Keep moving," Juno yelled, firing her pistol blindly behind them. They sprinted along a corridor that spiraled like a corkscrew. The Meridian agents pursued, their magnetic boots allowing them to run on any surface. They were fast, efficient, and heavily armed. "We cannot outrun them," Lysara shouted. "We have to try." Kyle returned fire, the blue bolts from his pulse rifle illuminating the chaotic geometry. They burst into a large chamber filled with floating platforms. Below them was an abyss of swirling memory fog. The agents flanked them. One dropped from the ceiling, landing on the platform in front of them. Another appeared behind, trapped. The lead agent raised a molecular disruptor cannon, aimed at Kale. "End of line. Sergeant, no!" Lysara screamed. She stepped in front of Kale. She did not raise a weapon. She closed her eyes and spread her arms. "Lysara, don't!" Kale yelled, reaching for her. Her 9 tails fanned out, glowing with a blinding white light. She let out a high, piercing cry that was not human. Tail split. Her form shattered. Suddenly, there was not one Lysara, but 10. They were spectral, translucent copies made of pure psionic energy. They swarmed the platform, weaving in and out of reality. The Meridian agents hesitated. Their sensors could not distinguish the target. They fired wildly. The spectral foxes leaped at the agents, passing through their armor and disrupting their nervous systems. The agents convulsed, dropping their weapons as their minds were bombarded with phantom sensory overload. "Go!" Lysara's voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Kyle grabbed the real Lysara, the one who was stumbling, her nose bleeding, and hauled her toward the exit tunnel. Juno threw a gravity grenade behind them, collapsing the bridge and sending the agents tumbling into the fog. They found a safe room deep in the lower levels. It was a small, spherical chamber where the walls hummed with a soothing, low-frequency vibration. The light here was soft and blue, flickering like sunlight filtering through deep water. Lysara collapsed onto the floor. She was shivering violently. Her skin was gray, and the white tips of her ears were fading. "Lysara," Kale said, dropping to his knees beside her. He ripped open his medkit. "She is fading," Juno said, scanning her with the medical tricorder. "That stunt she pulled, it drained her bioenergy reserves." "She is going into shock. Give me the stabilizer," Kale ordered. He injected the stimulant into her neck. Lysara gasped, her eyes fluttering open. She looked at him, but her gaze was unfocused. Did it work?" she whispered. "You saved us," Kale said softly. "You crazy, reckless royal, you saved us." Juno stood up. "I am going to guard the door, and I am going to give you 2 a minute." She stepped out, the door sealing with a hiss. Kyle was alone with her. The quiet of the room was heavy, intimate. He wet a cloth from his canteen and gently wiped the blood from her upper lip. His hands, usually so steady with a weapon, were trembling slightly. Lysara watched him. The fear of the chase was gone, replaced by something else. Something raw. "Why are you shaking, Kale?" she asked softly. "Because you almost died," he said. "Because I saw you break yourself to save me. That is what partners do," she said. "Partners," Kale repeated. He looked at the broken blade on his hip, then back at her. "Is that what we are?" Lysara reached up and touched his face. Her fingers were cool. "I saw your memory, Kyle. I saw how they used you. I saw your anger. It is beautiful. Beautiful." Kale scoffed. "It is ugly. It is just hate." "No," she said. "It is justice. It is love for the people you lost. You are not a machine, Kale. You are the most human thing I have ever met." The distance between them evaporated. The air in the chamber seemed to thicken, charged with the same energy that powered the blade. Kyle leaned into her touch. He had spent 20 years building walls, reinforcing his heart with armor plate and cynicism. Lysara had walked through them like they were mist. I am afraid, Lysara whispered. Her voice broke. Of the Meridian Accord? Kale asked. No. Of this. She gestured between them. My mother. She taught me that emotion is a tool, a lever to move the masses, a key to unlock treaties. I am afraid that if I let myself want you, really want you, it will just be another transaction, that I am just using you to survive. Kale looked deep into her golden eyes. He saw the terror there, not of death, but of manipulation, of being false. He took her hand and placed it over his heart. It was beating hard, a steady driving rhythm. Feel that, he said. She nodded. Does that feel like a transaction? He asked. No, she breathed. I am not an asset, Lysara, and I am not a guard dog. I am the man who is going to burn the Meridian Accord to the ground for what they did to you. And I am doing it because I choose to. Because I choose you. Lysara let out a small sob, a sound of relief and longing. She pulled him down. Their lips met. It was not a gentle fairy tale kiss. It was desperate. It was the collision of two people who had been running on the edge of a cliff for too long. It tasted of salt and adrenaline. It was messy and hungry and overwhelmingly real. Kale held her as if she were the only solid thing in a universe of smoke. He felt the tension leave her body, replaced by a softness, a yielding that was not surrender, but trust. For a long time, there was only the sound of their breathing and the underwater flicker of the lights. When they finally pulled apart, Lysara rested her forehead against his. Her color had returned. The light in her eyes was fierce. Kyle, she said. The blade. He looked down. The broken blade was glowing with a blinding intensity. It was vibrating, pointing toward a console in the center of the room that Kyle hadn't noticed before. Lysara stood up, using Kale for support. They walked to the console. She placed her hand on the interface. The blade hummed a harmonic note. A holographic display erupted from the console. It was a royal decree sealed with the biosignature of the first Empress. It is a contingency protocol, Lysara said, reading the ancient glyphs. My mother knew. She suspected the betrayal. She scrolled through the text. This designates the bearer of the bonded blade as the guardian of the realm, and it designates the survivor of the royal line not as Empress, but as key regent. What does that mean? Kale asked. It means I have the authority to dissolve all foreign treaties, Lysara said. I can shut down the psionic mines. I can ground every Meridian ship in Veyran airspace. The planet itself will obey me. We can stop them, Kale said. Yes, Lysara said. But there is a catch. She pointed to the bottom of the decree. The key regent must be physically present at the ancestral forge on Vera to enact the protocol. Kale swore softly. Vera is under martial law. The entire planet is a trap waiting for us. If we do not go, Lysara said, the Meridian Accord will drain the planet dry. They have engineered a famine to keep the population weak. Millions will die. Kyle, it is a suicide mission, Kale said. Lysara looked at him. She touched the spot on his armor where his heart was. We are good at those, she said. The door hissed open. Juno stepped back in, looking smug. I hate to interrupt the post-kiss glow, she said, but my sensors are picking up a second wave of Meridian ships entering the system. Heavy cruisers. If we are going to leave, we have to leave now. Kale looked at Lysara. He saw the resolve in her face. She was not just a princess anymore. She was a queen in the making. He took a deep breath. Prep the ship. Juno, Kale said. We are going to Vera. Juno grinned. I was hoping you would say that. I have always wanted to overthrow a government. It is on my bucket list. They ran back toward the hangar, the living stone of the archive parting to let them pass. The broken blade at Cale's side sang a song of war, and for the first time in a long time, Cale Rourke was ready to sing along. The orbital station known as the Aurelia was not designed for habitation. It was designed for envy. It was a golden halo suspended in the Lagrange point between the twin moons of the trade sector. A spinning ring of diamond glass and impossible architecture where the gravity was calibrated to a gentle, luxurious standard and the air smelled of imported orchids and money. It was neutral ground, technically, which meant it was the preferred hunting ground for every spy, traitor, and war profiteer in the coalition. Tonight, it was hosting the Interstellar Peace Summit, a gala that cost more than the GDP of most colony worlds. Cale Rourke adjusted the collar of his formal tunic. It was made of midnight blue synthetic silk, tailored to hide the bulk of the reactive armor vest he wore underneath. It felt like a strangulation device. "I hate this," Cale muttered, staring at his reflection in the tinted window of the docking bay. "I look like a waiter at a funeral." "You look dashing," Juno's voice crackled in his earbead, stiff, terrified, and ready to snap someone's neck. "But dashing. Try to smile. You are supposed to be a high-end bodyguard, not a gargoyle." Cale turned away from the window. Behind him, Lysara was waiting. He stopped. The air left his lungs. They had spent the last 48 hours in the cramped, sweating darkness of the sarcastic starfish, running from death squads. He had seen her covered in mud, bleeding, and terrified. But he had never seen her like this. She wore a gown of iridescent fabric that shifted color with her movement, flowing from deep violet to the pale gold of a sunrise. It was cut dangerously low in the back, revealing the intricate bioluminescent tattoos of her royal lineage, now disguised as avant-garde body art. Her 9 tails were not hidden this time. They were part of the costume, brushed until they shone like spun copper, decorated with tiny, floating gravity jewels that chimed softly when she moved. She was not hiding. She was weaponizing her identity. She was playing the role of a courtesan envoy, a Veyran exile selling her secrets and her company to the highest bidder. "It is too much," Cale said, his voice rough. "You are a target." "I am the bait," Lysara corrected him. She stepped closer, checking the hidden clasp on his shoulder where a micro-shield generator was concealed. "If I hide, they will hunt us in the shadows. If I stand in the light, they will come to me, and you will be there to catch them." She reached up and straightened his tie. Her fingers lingered on his chest. "Do not look at me like that, Cale," she whispered. "Like what?" he asked. "Like you want to carry me out of here and lock me in a tower," she said. "It breaks character. You are my employee tonight. You are supposed to be professional, detached, and lethal." "I can do lethal," Kyle said. "The rest is going to be a problem." Juno stepped off the ship's ramp. She was wearing a sprawling geometric headdress that looked like an explosion in a geometry factory, and a robe made of what appeared to be liquid chrome. "Make way for the Baroness Juno von Hestia, purveyor of rare void sculptures and conceptual artifacts," Juno announced, striking a pose. "How do I look?" "Like you escaped from a mental institution for billionaires," Cale said. "Perfect," Juno grinned. "That is exactly the demographic we are targeting. Let's go steal a revolution." The grand ballroom of the Aurelia was a cavernous space with a transparent floor that looked down on the starlit void. 3,000 guests mingled amidst floating fountains of champagne and sculptures made of hard light. The tension in the room was a physical weight, masked by laughter and the clinking of crystal. The Meridian Accord was here in force. Kyle clocked them instantly, men and women in sharp gray suits standing at the periphery, their eyes scanning the crowd with the dead, shark-like gaze of professional killers. Kyle took his position 3 steps behind Lysara, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes moving constantly. He was unarmed, save for the broken blade strapped to his thigh beneath the silk tunic. Security scanners had registered it as a ceremonial antique, inert and useless. They were half right. Lysara moved through the crowd like a shark in a koi pond. She did not walk. She flowed. Every movement was calculated to draw the eye, to solicit desire, and to disarm. She stopped at a cluster of diplomats near the main bar. "Gentlemen," she purred, her voice a low, melodic thrum. "You look like men who are discussing the price of a planet. Am I too late to place a bid?" A heavy-set man turned. He wore the sash of a coalition senator. "And who might you be, my dear?" the senator asked, his eyes dropping to the curve of her waist. "I am a memory of what you are about to lose," Lysara said, smiling a smile that did not reach her golden eyes. "I am Lysara." The name rippled through the group. They knew who she was, the fugitive princess, the terrorist. But here, in this sanctuary of excess, she was a curiosity, a thrill. "You are a bold woman to show your face here," the senator said, stepping closer. "There are warrants for your arrest. And yet, here I am, drinking your champagne," Lysara replied, taking a flute from a passing drone. "Perhaps the warrants are as inflated as your ego, Senator. Or perhaps I have information that makes me untouchable." She leaned in, whispering something in his ear. The senator paled. He nodded stiffly and moved away. "What did you say to him?" Kale murmured over the comms channel. "I told him I knew about his offshore accounts in the Nebula sector," Lysara replied, taking a sip of the drink. "My mother kept detailed files on everyone. Information is the only currency that matters tonight." Across the room, Juno was holding court with a group of wealthy art collectors. "You simply must see my latest acquisition," Juno was saying, gesturing wildly with a hors d'oeuvre. "It is an invisible statue from the dead dimension. It represents the futility of existence. It costs 4 million credits. But there is nothing there," a confused collector said, staring at the empty pedestal Juno had claimed. "Exactly," Juno cried. "It is pure nihilism. If you cannot see the genius, then clearly you lack the spiritual depth to own it." The collector looked panicked. I think I see it. Yes, the curvature is exquisite. I will take 2. Kyle ignored the comedy and focused on the threat. He saw a man watching Lysara from the balcony. The man was not drinking. He was tapping a rhythm on the railing. Morse code? No. A tactical count. Kale moved, intercepting a waiter. He lifted a datapad from the waiter's tray with a sleight of hand he hadn't used since his street rat days. He synced it to his own comms unit and cracked the local security net. "Juno," Kale whispered. "I am in the guest registry. Run a face match on the guy on the north balcony. Gray suit, scar on his left jaw." "Processing," Juno replied, her voice dropping the aristocrat act. "That is Victor Krell, Meridian's head of asset liquidation. He is not a diplomat. Kale. He is a cleaner. He is signaling someone," Kale said. Lysara drifted toward a secluded alcove where a Meridian executive was arguing with a hologram. Kale shadowed her, stepping into the alcove's entrance to block the view. The executive, a woman with hair like spun steel, did not notice Lysara. She was shouting at the hologram. "The timeline has accelerated," the executive hissed. "Prince Soren wants the throne secured by morning. If the summit is not disrupted by midnight, the coalition will vote for a ceasefire." We cannot have a ceasefire. We need the occupation, the hologram replied. It was Soren's voice. Kale recognized the arrogance. Trigger the lanterns, the executive ordered. Midnight. Make it look like a Varen suicide attack. The narrative is ready. Radical Princess bombs peace summit. It will be cleaner than an assassination. Lysara stiffened. Kale felt her shock through the empathic bond. A cold spike of horror. They are going to kill everyone, Lysara whispered, to frame me. Kale stepped into the alcove. The executive turned, her eyes widening. Discussion over, Kale said. He struck her. A single efficient chop to the carotid artery. She folded without a sound. Kale caught her before she hit the floor and dragged her behind a decorative fern. He grabbed the data pad she had dropped. Juno, Kale said, we have a problem. The ceremonial lanterns floating above the dance floor. They are drones. What kind of drones? Juno asked. Biopsionic disruptors, Kale said, reading the schematics on the pad. They are rigged to detonate at midnight. They will unleash a frequency that boils the nervous system of anyone with psionic potential, which means every Varen in the room, and causes mass panic and hemorrhaging in humans. Midnight, Juno said. That is in 10 minutes. We cannot evacuate, Lysara said, her voice steady but pale. The doors are sealed for the keynote speech. If we trigger the alarm, Meridian will detonate them early. We have to disable them, Kale said. I cannot hack them, Juno said. They are air-gapped, hardwired triggers. Kale looked at the floating lanterns. There were hundreds of them, drifting like lazy fireflies above the crowded dance floor. We cannot shoot them down, Kale said. The panic would cause a stampede. Lysara looked at Kale. She reached out and took his hand. The blade, she said. What? The broken blade? She said, it is an amplifier. In the archive, it projected the map. On the station, it healed me. It conducts energy. Kale, if I can get close enough to the center of the array, if I can release a stabilizing pulse. You want to jam the signal with your own mind, Kale realized. I can override the detonation command with a command of peace, she said. But I need a conduit. I need you. Kyle looked at the dance floor. The orchestra was starting a slow, swelling waltz. We have to get to the center of the floor, Kyle said. Then ask me to dance. Bodyguard, Lysara said. Kyle led her out onto the transparency. The universe spun beneath their feet. He placed one hand on her waist, the other holding her hand. He pulled her close, far closer than was appropriate for a servant and a mistress. The contact was electric. They moved into the swirl of the dancers. Kale steered her with military precision, navigating the sea of silk and velvet. 3 minutes to midnight, Kale whispered near her ear. Lysara rested her head on his shoulder. To the observers, it looked like a scandalous moment of illicit passion. To Kale, it felt like the quiet before a mortar strike. They are watching us, Lysara murmured against his neck. Krell is on the balcony. He knows something is wrong. Keep your eyes on me, Kyle said. Do not look at him. He spun her, moving deeper into the crowd. The scent of her perfume, jasmine, and ozone filled his head. He felt the warmth of her skin through the thin fabric of her dress. You are trembling, he said. I am terrified, she admitted. If this fails, I burn out my mind. I become a husk. It won't fail, Kyle said. He tightened his grip on her waist. I won't let you burn. Lysara looked up at him. The mask of the courtesan was gone. There was only the woman who had sat with him in the dark, who had seen his nightmares and called them justice. Kyle, she whispered, if we survive this. When we survive this, Kyle corrected. She smiled, a sad, sweet expression. When we survive this, I am done with masks. The music swelled to a crescendo. The lights dimmed. Above them, the lanterns began to pulse red. "Midnight," Kyle said. "Now." He stopped dancing. He did not let go of her. He reached down and drew the broken blade. The sound of metal leaving the sheath was lost in the music, but the light was not. The blade erupted with a brilliant, blinding blue glow. Screams rippled through the crowd as they saw the weapon. Krell, on the balcony, shouted into his comms, "Kill them! Detonate now!" The lanterns dropped, their casings opening to reveal the spinning disruptor coils. Lysara threw her head back. Her eyes turned pure white. Her 9 tails flared out, smashing through the holographic disguise, glowing with blinding incandescent light. She grabbed the blade with both hands, wrapping her fingers over Kyle's. Kale felt the surge. It was not like the electric shock of the archive. It was a tidal wave. It was every ounce of her compassion, her royal authority, her sheer will to protect, channeled directly into his body. He became the lightning rod. The blade hummed, the sound rising to a deafening roar. A sphere of blue energy exploded outward from them. The disruptor wave hit the sphere. For a second, the two forces battled, the red agony of the Meridian tech against the blue shield of the Veyron blood oath. Kale roared, his muscles tearing as he held the blade steady. He felt Lysara's mind buckling under the strain. She was taking the feedback, absorbing the pain of the disruptors to protect the crowd. "No," Kale gritted out. "Not you. Me. Give it to me." He pushed back against the bond, forcing the pain into his own nervous system. He used his rage, the cold, hard anger he had carried since the trenches, and fed it into the blade. The blue light turned white-hot. The sphere expanded violently. It washed over the lanterns. The disruptors didn't just stop. They shattered. The feedback loop overloaded their circuits. Hundreds of drones exploded into harmless showers of sparks and confetti. The wave continued, washing over the crowd. It didn't hurt them. It passed through them like a warm wind, stripping away panic, leaving a sudden, profound silence. The music had stopped. The lights were up. Kyle and Lysara stood in the center of the floor. They were breathing hard, still clutching the glowing blade between them. Lysara's tails were fully visible, a magnificent fan of gold and white. The crowd stared. They saw the debris of the drones. They saw the Meridian agents on the balcony with their weapons drawn. And they saw the princess, standing not as a terrorist, but as a shield. Juno's voice boomed over the station's public address system. She had hacked the DJ booth. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed was a failed assassination attempt by the Meridian Accord. Those lanterns were biological weapons. The Princess Lysara just saved your lives. You are welcome." A drone camera hovered close, broadcasting the image to every screen in the sector. Kale, the scarred veteran with the broken sword. Lysara, the glowing fox royal. Together, defiance incarnate. Krell screamed from the balcony, "Kill them! Open fire!" But the crowd did not scatter. They surged. A group of war veterans, coalition officers who had seen the blue light and recognized a protective field when they saw one, drew their sidearms. They turned not on Kyle, but on the Meridian agents. "We have to go," Kale said, his voice raspy. Lysara slumped against him. The glow was fading from her tails. Kale sheathed the blade and scooped her up into his arms. He looked at the camera drone one last time. "We are coming for you, Soren," Kale said to the lens. He turned and ran. They met Juno at the airlock. She was out of breath, her ridiculous headdress gone. "The ship is hot," Juno yelled. "We have a standard orbit, but the station defenses are waking up. We have to punch out now." They strapped in. The sarcastic starfish detached from the docking ring, engines screaming as it blasted away from the Aurelia. Behind them, The station was in chaos, but the signal was out. The narrative had broken. Kyle sat in the medical bay watching Lysara sleep. She was exhausted, but her vitals were stable. The bond between them had settled into a quiet, warm hum in the back of his mind. Juno walked in. She was not smiling. She held a datapad in her hand. "Kyle," she said quietly. "What is it?" Kyle asked, not looking away from Lysara. "We got a message, encrypted, from Meridian Command." Kyle looked up. They saw the broadcast. Juno said, "They know we are coming for Vera. They have issued a priority black order. Kill on sight." "We knew that was coming," Kale said. "There is more," Juno said. Her voice cracked. She handed him the pad. It was a video feed, grainy, dark. It showed a small apartment. A family, an older woman and a young man, were kneeling on the floor, their hands zip-tied. Behind them stood Meridian soldiers. "My mother," Juno whispered, "and my brother." A voiceover played. "Surrender the asset and the blade within 24 hours, or we liquidate the leverage." Kyle stared at the screen. He felt a coldness settle in his chest that had nothing to do with space. He looked at Juno. She was crying, silent tears tracking through her makeup. "We are not surrendering," Kale said. Juno looked at him. "They will kill them." "No," Kale said. He stood up, the broken blade heavy on his hip. "We are going to Vera. We are going to take the throne. And then..." He looked at the image of Juno's family. "Then we are going to teach the Meridian Accord what happens when you threaten a soldier's friends." He handed the pad back to her. "Plot a course for the Veran homeworld. Juno. Fast burn. We have 24 hours to win a war." Juno wiped her eyes. She looked at Kale, and then at the sleeping princess. "Fast burn," she agreed. The ship's engines flared, turning from the glittering luxury of the station toward the darkness of the outer rim. The party was over. The revolution had begun. Vera looked less like a planet and more like a bruise on the face of the galaxy. From the viewport of the sarcastic starfish, the world was a swirling sphere of violet and bruised gold, wrapped in an orbital blockade that was terrifying in its density. Coalition cruisers, their hulls painted in the stark white of peacekeeping forces, sat in geostationary grids. But darting between them like pilot fish were the sleek, black interceptors of the Meridian Accord. It was an occupation in everything but name. "We have a gap in the northern polar grid," Juno said, her fingers flying across the helm console. "The ion storms are messing with their sensors. If I cut the engines and glide in on a ballistic trajectory, we might look like space debris." "Space debris does not usually sweat this much," Cale Rourke said. He was standing behind her, gripping the headrest of the pilot's chair. "Just hold on," Juno muttered, "and try to think light thoughts." The ship shuddered as it hit the atmosphere. Flames licked the canopy, turning the cockpit into an oven. Juno wrestled the yoke, fighting the turbulence that threatened to tear the wings off. They dropped through the cloud layer, screaming over jagged mountain ranges of purple crystal, before banking hard into a deep, mist-filled canyon. Juno leveled them out, skimming just 20 feet above a rushing river of bioluminescent water. "Welcome to Vera," Juno said, exhaling a breath she seemed to have been holding since the orbital ring. Cale looked out the window. The landscape was alien and achingly beautiful. Trees with translucent leaves glowed with an internal rhythm, pulsing in time with the planet's magnetic field. But the beauty was marred by scars. Smoke columns rose from distant cities, and the sky was crisscrossed with the contrails of patrol drones. "Set us down near the Citadel of Whispers," Lysara said. She was sitting in the back, checking the charge on a plasma pistol she had taken from the station. The clan elders will be gathered there. They are expecting you to be dead, Kyle said. Disappointment is a family tradition, Lysara replied. The Citadel of Whispers was a fortress carved directly into the living rock of a cliff face, inside the Grand Council chamber. The air was cold and smelled of old incense and fear. Lysara pushed open the heavy doors. Kyle flanked her on the right, his hand resting on the hilt of the broken blade. Juno trailed behind, recording everything on her datapad with the lens disguised as a brooch. The council was in session. 20 elders, representing the major Fox clans, sat around a circular table of polished obsidian. When they saw Lysara, the room erupted. Silence. Lysara's voice cut through the noise like a whip. She walked to the center of the room. She did not bow. She stood tall, her 9 tails twitching with suppressed agitation. Princess. An elder with gray fur and robes of heavy velvet stood up. It was Lord Heron, a career politician who had survived 3 regimes by never having a spine. We were told you were a terrorist. The broadcasts. The broadcasts are lies manufactured by the Meridian Accord, Lysara said. I am here to reclaim my throne and drive the invaders from our sky. Heron looked nervous. He glanced at the other elders. Princess, the situation is delicate. The coalition peacekeepers are here to ensure stability. They have offered a treaty. What kind of treaty? Kale asked, stepping forward. His voice was a low growl that made the fur on Heron's neck stand up. Heron looked at the human with disdain. Unity, he said. To stop the civil unrest, the council has agreed that the royal line must be consolidated. You are to marry Prince Soren, Lysara, tonight. Lysara laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Marry the man who murdered my mother. It is for the good of the people, Heron insisted. It unites the factions. It stops the embargo. Soren has the backing of the Meridian Accord. Resistance is suicide. I would rather burn this citadel to the ground than let him touch me, Lysara said. Then you doom us all, Heron shouted. Before Lysara could respond, a heavy cane slammed onto the stone floor. Thud, thud. From the shadows at the back of the room, 3 figures emerged. They were old, impossibly old. Their fur was white as snow, and their eyes were milky with cataracts, but they moved with a terrifying authority. The clan matriarchs, the aunties, the central figure, matriarch Vora, sniffed the air. She hobbled toward Kale, ignoring Lysara completely. She stopped in front of him, reaching up to pinch his arm through his armor. Solid, Vora croaked. Smells like ozone and stubbornness. Not a Varen. He is my guardian, Lysara said, her voice softening with respect. He is a stray, Vora corrected, and you brought him into the inner sanctum. The matriarch looked at Kale. Her milky eyes seemed to pierce through his skull. The council wants to sell you to Soren like a prize broodmare, Vora said to Lysara. We aunties have a different question. Is this human house broken? I beg your pardon, Kale said. Quiet. Stray. Vora snapped. If he is to stand by the key regent, he must be tested. We do not care about your politics, Heron. We care about the blood, and the blood says this man is loud. Loud? Kale asked. I haven't said 5 words. Your heart, boy. Vora tapped his chest with her cane. It is screaming. It is deafening the spirits. We need to see if it screams for the right reasons. Trial by tea, the second auntie shouted gleefully. Lysara looked at Kale. Just do what they say. Do not lie. They can smell a lie before you even think it. The trial took place in a smaller antechamber, away from the prying eyes of the political cowards. Kale sat on a low cushion, surrounded by the three aunties. Lysara and Juno watched from the side. Auntie Vora placed a steaming cup of tea in front of Kale. The liquid was a violent shade of green and smelled like gym socks and cinnamon. "Drink," Vora commanded. "It is brewed from the truth root. It lowers your psychic barriers. If you lie, you vomit. If you tell a big lie, you seize. If you tell a really big lie, your head explodes." "Is she joking?" Kale asked Lysara. Lysara grimaced. "I have never seen a head actually explode, but I saw a cousin pass out for 3 days." Kale picked up the cup. He looked at the aunties. He looked at Lysara. He drank it in one gulp. It burned. It felt like swallowing liquid fire. His vision swam, and suddenly, the room felt very sharp. Every color was vibrant. Every sound was amplified. "Question 1, Vora said, leaning in. "Why do you help the princess? Is it for the reward money?" "No," Kale said. The word fell out of his mouth before he could check it. "Is it for the glory?" the second auntie asked. "No." "Is it because you want to bed her?" the third auntie asked with a wicked grin. Juno choked on a laugh in the corner. Kale felt the heat rise in his neck. "It is complicated." "Answer," Vora barked. "I help her because she is the first thing I have found in 20 years that makes sense," Kale said. His voice was steady, despite the burning in his gut. "I help her because she saves people when she doesn't have to. I help her because when I look at her, I don't see a target or a mission. I see a future." The aunties leaned back. Their tails swished in unison. "He is romantic." The second auntie sighed. "Disgusting." "He is loyal," Vora said. "But is he polite? Stand up. Stray." Kale stood. "Tail etiquette." Vora announced. "The princess has 9. In a combat scenario, the room is crowded. How do you move without stepping on the royal dignity?" They threw a dozen ribbons on the floor, simulating the movement of tails. "Navigate," Vora ordered. Kale moved. He had spent his life dodging shrapnel and laser fire. Dodging ribbons was easy. He moved with a dancer's grace, his boots landing inches from the silk strips, never touching them. He anticipated the flow, stepping where the ribbons weren't, his eyes locked on an imaginary threat. "Passable." Vora grunted. "Now, the final test, the vow." She pointed to the broken blade on his hip. "Draw it." Kale drew the blade. It was dark, the metal cold. "That weapon is dead," Vora said. "It is broken because your faith was broken. You cannot reforge it with steel. Human. You reforge it with a promise. Why should we trust you with our queen?" Kale looked at Lysara. She was watching him, her hands clasped tight. "I am not a Veyran," Kale said. "I do not know your rituals. I do not know your songs. But I know war. And I know that the people outside those doors, the Meridian Accord, the politicians, they look at her and they see a resource. They see a battery." He turned the broken blade in his hand, looking at the jagged edge. "I look at her and I see the person who saved me from my own darkness. I am not here to own her. I am not here to rule with her. I am here to stand between her and the world so she can choose her own path. If that isn't enough for you." He sheathed the blade. "Then I will fight you too." Grandmothers. The room went silent. Vora stared at him. Then, a slow, toothy grin spread across her face. "He threatened to fight me." Vora cackled. "I like him. He has teeth." Vora turned to Lysara. She reached into her robe and pulled out a scroll. It was old, sealed with wax that shimmered like starlight. "Your mother gave this to me before the end," Vora said. "She knew the council would try to cage you. She knew Soren would try to steal the throne." Lysara took the scroll. She broke the seal. What is it? Lysara asked. The law of the Key Regent, Vora said. It is an ancient statute. It says that the monarch cannot be forced into a treaty if they are bonded. Bonded to whom? Juno asked. To a guardian recognized by the ancestral blade, Vora said. If the blade glows for him, and if you accept him of your own free will, then under Veyran law, you are an autonomous entity. No council, no prince, and no off-world corporate lawyers can touch you. You become a sovereign unit of two, but the blade is broken, Kyle said. Then fix it, Vora snapped. Go to the forge city of Ignis. The fires there respond to the blood oath. But be warned, the blade cannot be forced. It only reforges if the bond is equal. If there is coercion, if there is doubt, it will remain dust. The forge city of Ignis was a marvel of suspended engineering. It was built over a caldera of active magma, a network of floating obsidian bridges and platforms suspended by magnetic fields. The heat was intense, roiling up from the depths. But the city itself was cool, lit by the blue-white glow of foxfire, a psionic energy source that the Veyrans used to shape metal. They landed the sarcastic starfish on the main landing pad. The city was deserted. The workers had fled when the occupation began. The ancestral forge lay at the end of the central bridge, a massive anvil shaped like a sleeping fox. We have to hurry, Juno said, checking her scanners. I am picking up multiple signals inbound, fast movers, Meridian dropships. They tracked us, Kale said. He checked his rifle. Lysara, get to the anvil. Juno, set up a perimeter with the ship's turrets. I will hold the bridge. Lysara grabbed his arm. Kale, you cannot hold a whole army. I just need to buy you 5 minutes. Kale said, go. She ran toward the forge. Kale took a position behind a statue of a forgotten king, leveling his rifle at the sky. The clouds broke. 4 black dropships screamed down, their engines roaring, ropes dropped, and soldiers in Meridian combat armor slid down. Here we go, Kyle muttered. He opened fire. The bridge became a kill zone. Kale was a whirlwind of precision violence. He dropped 3 soldiers before they hit the ground. He moved, fired, moved again. He used the terrain, the statues, the very architecture of the city to fragment their advance. But there were too many of them. Laser fire chewed up the stone around him. A grenade exploded near his feet, sending him flying. He landed hard, his ears ringing. He scrambled up. A squad was flanking him, moving along a lower maintenance gantry. Kyle drew the broken blade, even broken. It was a heavy bar of alien alloy. He met the squad in close quarters. He parried a vibro knife, shattered a helmet with the pommel, and kicked a soldier off the edge of the bridge into the magma below. Behind him, at the forge, Lysara was screaming the words of the ritual. She had cut her palm, pressing it against the cold anvil. By blood and will, by heart and choice. The anvil began to glow. On the bridge, a Meridian-heavy trooper landed. He was wearing a powered exosuit, armed with a rotary cannon. Target acquired. The trooper droned. Kyle charged. It was suicide. He knew it. But he had to keep the fire away from Lysara. The cannon spun up. Kyle slid, going low. The bullets chewed up the walkway where he had been a second ago. He slammed into the trooper's legs, jamming the broken blade into the suit's knee joint. The trooper backhanded him. The blow was like being hit by a truck. Kale flew backward, crashing into the stone railing. He felt ribs crack. His vision went white. He struggled to stand, coughing blood. The trooper loomed over him, raising the cannon for a kill shot. No! The scream came from the forge. Lysara turned. She saw Kale broken on the stones. Something inside her snapped. The empathy, the compassion, the gentleness, it all evaporated. In its place was a cold red void of pure vengeance. She raised her hand. The foxfire in the canals below erupted. It didn't glow blue anymore. It burned a violent, angry crimson. "Die," she hissed. The fire lashed out like a whip. It struck the heavy trooper, melting his armor in a microsecond. He didn't even have time to scream. Lysara advanced down the bridge. Her eyes were black pools. Her tails were wreathed in red flame. Every soldier she looked at fell to their knees, clutching their heads as she projected pure agony into their minds. She was a goddess of death. She was magnificent, and she was terrifying. She reached Kale. She looked at the soldiers retreating toward their dropships. "I will kill them all," she whispered. "I will burn their ships. I will burn their headquarters. I will leave nothing but ash." She raised her hands to pull the dropships out of the sky. "Lysara." The voice was weak, raspy. Kale reached out, his bloody hand grabbing the hem of her dress. "Stop," he wheezed. She looked down at him. Her face was twisted in a rictus of hate. "They hurt you. If you do this—" Kale coughed, wincing. "If you kill them like this, you become Soren, you become Meridian, you become a monster. I do not care." She wept, the red fire flickering. "I care," Kale said. He forced himself to sit up, groaning. "I didn't fight for a monster. I fought for the woman who saves people. Come back, Lyssa. Come back to me." He held out his hand. The red fire wavered. Lysara looked at the terrified soldiers. She looked at the destruction she had caused. Then she looked at Kale's hand. She took a breath. A long, shuddering breath. The red drained from the world. The blue light returned, softer this time. She fell to her knees, grasping his hand. "I almost lost myself." "You are back now," Kale whispered. He looked at the forge. The anvil was pulsing with a steady white light. "The blade," Lysara said. "It is ready." Kale dragged himself up, leaning on her. They walked to the anvil. He placed the broken hilt on the stone. She placed her hand over his. "I, Lysara of Vera, choose this man," she said clearly. "Not as a servant, not as a master, but as a partner. I, Kale Rourke, choose this woman," Kale said, his voice gaining strength, "to guard her life, but never to own her soul." The light flared. It was blinding. The metal of the blade liquefied, flowing together, reshaping itself. The cracks vanished. The dull gray alloy turned a brilliant, shimmering silver. The edge honed itself to a monofilament sharpness. Kyle lifted the sword. It was whole. It hummed with a song of perfect resonance. The dropships were circling back for another run. Lysara stood up. She wiped the tears from her face. "Juno," she said into her comms. "Are you ready?" "I have been ready for 10 minutes, Juno yelled. "I hacked the planetary broadcast array. You are live in 3, 2, 1. Huge holographic screens across the planet, in the cities, in the camps, in the orbital station, flickered and changed. The face of the Meridian CEO vanished. Instead, they saw Lysara. She stood on the burning bridge, soot-stained, fierce, with the reforged blade shining in Kale's hand beside her. "People of Vera," Lysara said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of the mountains. "I am Lysara, and I am not afraid anymore." She held up a datapad. "This is the proof. The Meridian Accord poisoned my mother. They staged the attacks. They are starving you to steal your land." The screen shifted, showing the files Juno had stolen. The comms logs. The gas attack footage. "They want you to believe that you are weak," Lysara continued. "They want you to believe that peace only comes from submission. But I tell you this, peace comes from choice." She looked at the camera. "I reject the marriage to Prince Soren. I reject the Meridian Treaty. And as key regent, bonded by the ancestral blade, I declare the occupation illegal. She pointed the reforged sword at the sky. Go home, Meridian. Vera is closed for business. Across the planet, the silence broke. It did not start with gunshots. It started with people standing up. In the capital, a column of Meridian tanks was rolling down the main boulevard. A group of civilians, shopkeepers, students, elders, walked out into the street. They did not have weapons. They linked arms. The tank commander honked his horn, "Move or be crushed." The civilians did not move. Their tails linked together, forming a mesh of soft light, a psionic barrier, fed by the collective will of 1,000 people. Rose up. The tank rammed the barrier. It hit a wall of solid force. The engine stalled. In the orbital station, the dock workers simply stopped working. They sat down. Cargo halted. Fuel lines were cut. The massive extraction ships drifted, useless. On the bridge of the sarcastic starfish, Juno watched the telemetry. "Kale," she said, grinning. "You might want to see this. The entire planet just went on strike." Kale leaned against the railing of the bridge, the reforged sword in his hand. He looked at Lysara. She was watching the city lights below, which were blinking in a rhythmic pattern. A code. "We stand with the Fox. It is not over," Kyle said. "Meridian won't leave just because we asked nicely." "No," Lysara said. Her eyes were clear, golden, and full of a dangerous hope. But now they know they cannot win. She took his hand. "Let's go finish this. Guardian." They walked back to the ship, the bridge of light guiding them toward the final confrontation. The revolution had not been televised. It had been felt, and the galaxy was holding its breath. The sky above the capital city of Ethelgard did not darken with clouds. It grayed with death. High in the upper atmosphere, the Meridian Accord's final gambit had activated. They called it the Stability Array, a lattice of orbital satellites that hummed with a frequency designed to soothe civil unrest. That was the lie. The truth was visible to anyone with eyes to see the wilting of the bioluminescent trees or the dulling of the auroras that danced over the poles. It was a siphon, a planetary-scale parasite. Cale Rourke stood on the balcony of the Citadel, looking up at the geometric web of lights constricting the planet. He could feel it in his teeth, a low-grade vibration that tasted like aluminum foil. Beside him, the reforged blade at his hip was cold, its usual hum dampened by the oppressive dampening field of the array. "They are drinking the planet," Cale said, his voice flat. "They are not just taking the ore anymore. They are stripping the biopsionic field. If that array reaches full power, Vera becomes a dead rock in 48 hours. Lysara stood next to him. She was no longer wearing the silk of the court or the rags of a fugitive. She wore combat armor, painted in the matte white of the Royal Guard, but with the nine-tailed crest of her house emblazoned in defiant gold on the chest. "They are betting that we will surrender to save the biosphere," Lysara said. "Soren thinks I will trade the throne for the life of the planet. He does not know you very well then," Cale said. Lysara turned to look at the war room behind them. It was a chaotic mix of Fox clan elders, defecting coalition officers, and student revolutionaries. Maps were spread over the tables, marked with holographic pins. "I am not trading anything," Lysara said. "We are going to cut the throat of that machine." The alliance was uneasy, held together by the gravity of the crisis and the sheer force of Lysara's will. Inside the war room, General Halloway, a coalition commander who had defected with his cruiser after seeing the broadcast, was arguing with Matriarch Vora. "My ships cannot breach the shield grid around the array," Halloway shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "Meridian has placed 3 dreadnoughts in a defensive triangle. It is a meat grinder." "Then we do not go through the meat," Vora snapped, thumping her cane. We go through the bone. The planet has veins, human, ley lines of energy. If we strike the ground-based tethers, the shield grid will fluctuate. Kale stepped up to the table. The room went quiet. He was the guardian now, the wielder of the ancestral blade. Even the generals listened. Vora is right, Kale said. We cannot win a void battle. Meridian has the tonnage. We have to fight an asymmetric war. He pointed to the map. We split into 3 teams. Kale outlined. Team Alpha, led by General Halloway, engages the blockade. You do not need to win. You just need to be loud. Draw their fire. Make them look up. Halloway nodded slowly. A distraction. We can do that. Team Beta is the ground resistance. Kale continued. The clans and the student militias. Your job is sabotage. Hit the power couplings, the supply lines, the comms towers. Make the occupation bleed from 1,000 cuts. And Team Gamma? Lysara asked. Kale looked at her. Team Gamma is us. We take a strike team directly to the primary tether site at the apex mountain. That is where the siphon is anchored. We destroy the anchor. The array collapses. It is a fortress, Halloway warned. Soren is there. Krell is there. They have dug in. Good, Kale said, a dangerous light in his eyes. I would hate to have to hunt them down later. Before the launch, there was a moment of stillness. The calm did not come from the world outside, which was screaming with sirens and distant explosions, but from a quiet alcove in the Citadel gardens where the noise faded. Kyle sat on a stone bench, sharpening a combat knife. It was a nervous habit. Lysara watched him, her arms crossed. You are doing it again, she said. Doing what? Kale asked, shutting down. She said, you go into this mode, the soldier mode. You put your emotions in a box so you can function. Kale paused. It keeps me alive. Lyssa, it keeps you lonely, she countered. She sat beside him, taking the knife from his hands and setting it aside. She took his hands in hers. The connection between them, the bond forged by the blade and the ritual, hummed to life. It was not the overwhelming flood it had been at the forge. It was a steady, warm current, a lifeline. We are about to walk into a fire. Kyle, she whispered, I need you to know something. What? He asked, reforging the blade. It was not just a political stunt. It was not just to unlock the treaty. I know, Kale said. Do you? She asked, searching his face. The ancient laws say a guardian is a protector, a shield, but I do not want a shield. I can protect myself. I chose you because you are the only person who looks at the throne and sees a chair, not a prize. You challenge me. Kale looked down at their joined hands. I spent 20 years following orders, he said quietly. Good orders, bad orders. It didn't matter. I was a weapon. When I met you, I thought I was just doing a job. But somewhere between the broken sword and the kiss in the archive, I stopped being a weapon. He looked up, his eyes fierce. I am not fighting for Vera today. Lyssa, I am fighting for the right to wake up tomorrow and ask you what you want for breakfast. I am fighting for the quiet. Lysara smiled and tears gathered in her golden eyes. The quiet, she repeated. That sounds like a dream. It is a plan, Kale said. He leaned in, kissing her. It was slow, deliberate. It was a promise. In the shadow of the death machine in the sky, they carved out a space for a future that had nothing to do with war and everything to do with belonging. When they pulled apart, the fear was gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline resolve. Let's go break their toy, Kale said. While the armies mobilized, Juno was engaged in a very different kind of warfare. She had piloted the sarcastic starfish to the far side of the planet, docking at a remote Meridian refueling outpost. She was not wearing her smuggler's jacket. She was wearing a severe, tailored suit she had fabricated from the ship's curtains, and she held a data pad with an air of terrifying bureaucratic authority. She marched into the detention block where her mother and brother were being held. The guards leveled their weapons. "Halt! Identify yourself!" the sergeant barked. Juno didn't flinch. She tapped her data pad, looking bored. "I am Senior Efficiency Auditor Carenza from Meridian Corporate HQ." Juno lied, her voice dripping with disdain. "I am here to conduct a surprise asset review of this facility. My shuttle is double parked, so I suggest you lower those rifles before I deduct the cost of your ammunition from your pension fund." The sergeant blinked. We didn't receive any notification of an audit. That is the definition of a surprise. You turnip," Juno snapped. "Now, take me to the high-value leverage assets. The prisoner manifest lists a family unit 7 Alpha. I need to verify they are still breathing. If they are damaged, the insurance paperwork alone will take me 3 weeks, and I will take it out of your hide." The sergeant, terrified by the prospect of paperwork, lowered his weapon. "Right this way, Auditor." They led her to the cell. Inside, her mother and brother sat on bunks, looking weary but unharmed. When they saw Juno, her brother started to speak. Silence! Asset!" Juno barked, winking at him with the eye the guard couldn't see. "Do not speak unless spoken to." She turned to the sergeant. "Open the cell. I need to inspect them for depreciation." The sergeant keyed the lock. Juno stepped inside. She turned to the guard. "Sergeant, I am also seeing a discrepancy in your personal file. It says here you are authorized for a Level 4 intelligence clearance. Is that correct?" "Yes, ma'am," the sergeant said, standing tall. Juno smiled. It was a shark's smile. "Excellent. Then you will understand why I have to do this." She pulled a stun grenade from her perfectly tailored pocket and dropped it at his feet. "Audit closed," she said. Bang! The sergeant and his squad collapsed in a heap of twitching limbs. Juno grabbed her mother and brother. "Come on, we have to go." "Juno," her mother gasped, "you look respectable. Do not get used to it." "Mom," Juno said, kicking the sergeant's rifle away. "It is a disguise. We are stealing a shuttle and blowing up a fuel depot on the way out." "That is my girl," her mother said, beaming. The assault on Apex Mountain began at dusk. General Holloway's fleet engaged the blockade in orbit, lighting up the sky with lance beams and missile trails. On the ground, the clan struck the power grid, plunging the hemisphere into darkness. Kale and Lysara led the strike team up the slopes of the mountain. The air here was thin and crackled with static electricity from the tether. The Meridian defenders were dug into bunkers, pouring fire down the slope. Kale moved point, the reforged blade in his hand deflecting plasma bolts. The alloy absorbed the energy, glowing brighter with every hit. He was a whirlwind, cutting a path through the barricades, while Lysara covered him with blasts of telekinetic force. They breached the perimeter wall and entered the tether complex. It was a massive industrial cathedral, dominated by a pulsing beam of white light that shot straight up into the sky. Standing on the gantry overlooking the beam was Prince Soren. Beside him stood Victor Krell. "Cousin!" Soren shouted, his voice amplified by the facility's speakers. "You are too late. The extraction is at 80%. Vera is already dying." Lysara stepped forward onto the platform. The wind whipped her hair, and her 9 tails lashed behind her. "The only thing dying today is your ambition. Soren," she said. "Kill them," Krell ordered. A squad of elite Meridian guards charged. Kale met them. It was a dance of steel and fire. He didn't fight with anger anymore. He fought with economy. A parry, a thrust, a step. He was protecting Lysara, clearing the space for her to work. Lysara ignored the fight. She walked toward the beam. She closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. She didn't try to fight the machine. She reached past it. She reached down, into the rock, into the magma, into the sleeping consciousness of the planet itself. "Wake up," she whispered. The ground shook, not a tremor, but a heave. The strange phenomenon that Kale had witnessed since the beginning, the blade glowing, the empathy, the living stone of the archive, it finally clicked into place. Vera was not just a rock with resources, and it was a semi-sentient biosphere, a planetary nervous system. And the royal line wasn't just a government. They were the interface. The blade was the login key. Lysara slammed her hand onto the control console of the siphon. Rejection protocol initiated. She commanded. The beam of light wavered. The color shifted from white to a violent, purging green. The mountain groaned. Giant roots of crystallized psionic energy burst from the floor, wrapping around the meridian machinery. They crushed the metal like tinfoil. Soren screamed as the console sparked and exploded. The siphon reversed. Instead of draining the planet was surging back up the connection, overloading the satellites in orbit. High above, the stability array began to fracture. Satellites exploded in chains of fire, looking like a new constellation being born and dying in the same second. Krell, seeing the battle was lost, aimed his disruptor at Lysara's back. "Goodbye, princess." Kale was there. He didn't use the sword. He threw his combat knife. It took Krell in the shoulder, pinning him to the wall. Krell dropped the gun, howling. Kale walked over and punched him. Once. Hard. Krell slumped to the floor. "That is for the audit," Kale muttered. Lysara stood before Soren. The prince was on his knees, surrounded by the wreckage of his machine. The green light of the awakened planet illuminated his terrified face. "Do it," Soren spat. "Execute me. It is what our family does." Lysara looked at him. She looked at the blade in Kale's hand. She looked at the ruin of the machinery. "No," she said. Soren blinked. "What? If I kill you, I am just the strongest fox in the den," Lysara said. "I am just another warlord. Vera deserves better." She gestured to the open airlock, where the wind was howling. "You are exiled, Soren. You will be taken into coalition custody. You will stand trial for treason and conspiracy. You will answer to the law, not to a blade." "I am a prince," Soren shouted. "You are a memory," Lysara said. She turned her back on him. "Guards," she said to the defecting coalition soldiers who had breached the room, "take him away." The collapse of the array was visible from half the planet. The lattice broke apart, the debris burning up harmlessly in the upper atmosphere, creating a shower of shooting stars that lasted for hours. As the artificial dampening field lifted, the planet took a deep breath. The bioluminescence in the forests flared to blinding brightness. The air felt cleaner, sharper. In the orbit, General Holloway's forces, bolstered by the sudden confusion of the Meridian fleet, accepted the surrender of the dreadnoughts. It was over. The epilogue came 3 months later. The great hall of the Citadel had been rebuilt. The windows were open, letting in the sunlight and the breeze. There were no shadows in the corners. Lysara sat on the throne. It was a simple chair now, stripped of the gold and jewels. The round table of the council had been expanded. It now included clan elders, human representatives from the colony districts, and even a trade union leader from the mines. Radical transparency, Lysara called it. Every meeting was broadcast. Every credit was accounted for. Kyle stood by her side. He was not wearing a uniform. He wore a simple tunic and trousers, the reforged blade strapped to his hip. He was the first guardian, a title that had been rewritten in the Constitution. He was not a servant. He was a partner with veto power. The doors opened, and Juno strutted in. She was wearing a medal that looked suspiciously like a bottle opener on a ribbon. "Report from the tribunal," Juno announced, tossing a datapad to Lysara. "The Coalition Court has formally dissolved the Meridian Accord. Their assets are frozen. Their board is in prison, and Soren is currently complaining about the quality of the nutrient paste in a maximum security cell on Titan." "Justice is served," Lysara said, smiling. "And," Juno added, "my mother says hello. She is baking a pie. She wants to know when you two are coming for dinner. And she insists Kale brings the sword because it cuts the crust perfectly." "We will be there," Kale said. The council session ended. The delegates filed out, arguing amiably about tax codes and zoning laws. It was boring. It was mundane. It was beautiful. Lysara stood up and walked to the balcony. Kale followed. They looked out over the city. The scars of the war were still there, but scaffolding covered the ruins. The people were rebuilding. "We did it," Lysara said softly. "We did." Kale agreed. He put his arm around her. She leaned into him, her tails wrapping around his legs. "You know," Lysara said, watching the sun set, "they are calling this the healing revolution. They say we conquered an empire with empathy." Kale chuckled. "We used a fair amount of high explosives, too." Lysara laughed. "True. But the explosives didn't reforge the blade." She reached down and touched the hilt of the weapon. It hummed, a contented purring sound. "Healing is not passive." "Kyle," she said, echoing the lesson they had learned in the blood and the dark. "It is the hardest thing in the world. It takes more courage to mend a break than to make one." Kale kissed the top of her head. "Then I guess we have a lot of work to do," he said. Lysara turned to him, her golden eyes full of light. "Yes," she said, "but we have time." She looked at the horizon, where the first stars were appearing, no longer a blockade but a frontier. And for the first time in 100 years, the Fox Princess and her guardian watched the night fall without fear of what the morning would bring. Love, after all, was the only engine that could turn the world without breaking it.